everybody to Blerdlines News. This is your host, Cam. With me, as always, is
the wacky, wily professor.
And we're back with the quick hits of some news items that kind of came across our feeds these days. One in particular, we both just watched it right now, is Ryan Coogler of Black Panther and Creed fame, also Fruitvale Station, also a great movie.
Let's not forget Fruitvale.
His new movie with Michael B. Jordan, reunited with him again for Sinners, which used to be called the Unnamed Black Vampire Movie.
Oh, so that's how it's okay.
Yeah. So it was maybe started earlier this year that it was talked about. It was going to be a period piece. Not going to say horror, but I did hear vampires or something of that effect, because when it first got announced, people thought it was Beirut, but it is not actually. It's something different. So I don't know. But so I'll do the trailer. Looked interesting. I'm curious.
Yeah, I agree that the trailer looks interesting. I don't know if I'm curious, and I'll explain that in a second. But it's interesting that you say that, because I didn't know the backstory about the whole Bitterroot connection, or Bitterroot. We call it Bitterroot because that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. But Bitterroot is a comic book that's about, to put it in a nutshell, a family of Black supernatural hunters, if you will, or like almost supernatural superheroes. They fight against demons and monsters and things like that. It's a more complex story than I'm making it, but just to illustrate the point. So I did have that thought as I listened to the Jordan beau. That's obviously dialogue from the script or from the movie. And I thought that. I said, this very much seems like Bitterroot. But it's going to get that comparison because, why not? And also because Bitterroot is so unique, and this story seems like it may not have intended to, he may not have wanted it to be a horror film. But it's definitely a horror film now, and it's possibly one that's more along the lines of like John Carpenter's Vampires from 1998, where, you had James Wood as this, and Stephen Baldwin, or was that Daniel Baldwin? I think it was one of the Baldwin brothers. They're these vampire hunters, and it has sort of horror movie stakes and violence, but it's clearly aiming for, because what else came out around that time? Blade. So it's clearly aiming for that kind of audience where it's vampire slayer versus evil Dark Lord vampire, but with the horror elements. And also at that time, Buffy was popular, so there's all of that. Fast forwarding some 20, almost 30 years later, with this, I think that gave off a similar vibe where maybe that's not what Ryan Coogler was aiming for, because he hasn't made any kind of horror film to date and hasn't shown any real interest in it. So it kind of feels like this might be something that is a hybrid of studio. He kind of compromised on what the studio wanted in balancing out what he could get in there from his own ideas or so on and so forth. Because it strikes me as Michael B. Jordan's character is somewhat this Avenger type figure, past Reeves of the supernatural, and he's sort of been fighting off. I'm confused because it seems like he's a veteran, but then at the same time, he says he hasn't encountered magic or demons or anything before that. So,
and I think that's kind of that's the part I was wondering too. So what movie? It was set in like World War I, Black protagonist. Joaquin Woodbine was in it.
You're talking about, I think you're talking about Overlord.
Overlord, yeah. So it gave me a little tinge of that, of being like a horror type of film set in a time period that,
but not really a horror.
yeah, exactly. And so, because even Overlord was a little bit more on the sci-fi type than very real,
Oh,
like
100%.
so
Like an
horror.
episode
Yeah.
of Twilight Zone, or
Yep.
like
Yep.
Outer Limits, or
Exactly.
something like that.
That's exactly when I watched it. That's what I took away from it. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was super enjoyable. But
It was good. I expected something different, so I was a little disappointed. I'm not gonna lie, but it's a watchable film. It's totally good Saturday night matinee popcorn theater, and I think it embraced that all the way from the beginning. And I thought and so that's why it worked. It wasn't what I expected, but it still worked.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that I'm curious to see how this all plays out, because yeah, Bitterroot is an awesome story that is interesting. And even part 2, which is coming out soon, they do a time jump. Now they're in the 60s, I think. And
Wow, that should be very interesting.
Yeah, so you get to follow the family's descendants and some family members in the 60s doing basically the same thing. So I think it's gonna be very, very interesting. I hope that they develop that with some care and some compassion, and take some time with it so they can do something dope. I also think they're gonna try to make that a series, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
hopefully it's a TV series and not a film, because I think a TV series would do justice more than the film.
Totally. But yeah, this looked interesting. I was, curious to see what Coogler was going to do next. And this looks like something that's outside of his comfort zone. So maybe it'll be something cool.
Yeah, he's got the skill. I think I was largely impressed with Fruitvale Station, not with Michael B. Jordan, but with the film. Because I honestly do not think that guy's even half decent. I just think he's done well in action films and things like that. And ladies clearly love him. And so, in that regard, he's a good cast in a situation in a film like this, where it's kind of half action, but also slowed down enough for him to try to do spectacles out. The double twin thing never works. It never works.
Yeah, even when it does work, it doesn't work. Because what was the Hardy film where he plays twins? The movie was horrible. His performance was amazing.
Exactly, and this like recently with Acolyte, the show that gives us all pain when we mention it. But I just brought it up to mention it's the same. It's one of those things. Now they may do it better, but because it seemed like one of the twins will be killed off quite early, which means that we do not have to suffer through a performance of Michael B. Jordan trying to be two different people.
Yeah,
talking to one another.
Yeah, and honestly, the Hardy film, which I can't remember what it was, but like the overall story and stuff just wasn't good. But but Hardy's performance as two separate people was fucking amazing. And again, just kind of
that was that. It was like a period piece, wasn't it?
Yeah, period piece. He's in It was in London too, so you get to use his real accent and stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things, like you said, twins never works. It just rarely ever works. And then even when the performances are good, the freaking story's bad. So I think I'm curious to see what they do with it. I'm always for new Black IP. Just give me something new and try some shit. Like, enjoy yourself. So I thought that was that. So I think that if nothing else, that'll be the cool part about it. Plus, I like that both Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are actively doing things like this, like trying to do new IPs, or investing in things that they think is going to be interesting, like that kind of stuff. So I think that's, to me, I'm more curious to see how it comes out. And like you said, even if it hits the Overlord sweet spot of just being entertaining,
it'll be fine. Yeah, Overlord made money, and that's the thing. Like, it was a surprise hit at the box office, and it had lukewarm reviews, but it was overall a decent film in terms of what they invested and what they got out of it. So, I think Ryan Coogler still being able to do his own thing and get the writer, director, producer credit is a key thing for him, especially when he's using studio money. Like it's not an easy thing to get that kind of billing, but you can see they can market him without marketing his name necessarily. But even now they're starting to use his name. But even if you don't know him as Ryan Coogler, the filmmaker, you know the man, you know what Black Panther is, you know what Creed is. Most people.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was gonna say the other things that we were talking about was our good friend Beau Demayo is out in the social streets once again.
That man said he got receipts. I'm just saying I want to see them. And
So
I'm tired of all the tweets.
Yeah. So most recently, season 2, it has gotten a release date, and it's been pushed back, actually, unfortunately, to 2026, which is kind of wild to think about. But then I realized that 2025 is literally 3 months away.
Yeah. And animation is how it goes.
Yeah. So, but with that being said, one of the things that Beau Demayo has been pretty good at is been kind of just trolling his former employer, and dropping nuggets about what could have been. And so again, well, great entertainment, awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. It also does get a little thing where you're kind of like, yo, man, you're now the dude that's like, let me back into the club after you're getting kicked out.
Yeah, but also saying fuck club on.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Like he's like talking out of both sides. I mean, and I don't think I think he's smart enough to know he's not going to be fired by them. I hope he understands that. Because even if he had the chance, that chance is long gone based on his activities on social media. Now, said that, maybe he never wanted to be hired. He just wanted to put his voice out there and have fans understand that's his work.
Yeah, and I think that part is good. I think the part that he messes up on, or just we're all observing, we don't know the dude personally, is just that it's more about what are you gonna do now? Because I mean, like you brought chat, we're talking about how Garth Ennis, when he created The Boys, he did it at a response after working for Marvel and DC and being super frustrated with just the process of just working with the big two and working with their specific sandboxes. And so being able to get out of that sandbox and create his own thing and then do whatever the fuck he wanted to do, he got to finally get it all out of his system. And that's what The Boys basically was. So send up all the Marvel shit, all the DC shit. And by doing that, he got to get it all out of his system in his own IP, in his own way, uncensored. And then now that IP is now
making money,
and is a freaking well-known show that everyone loves and is all about it, right?
It has spun off 2 successful other shows, one animated and one live action that's going to continue to go on after the original show is likely over.
Yeah, out here getting his Kirkman on. That's what he's doing right now. He's out here getting his Kirkman, which I agree. It's just dope. And I think for Beau Demayo, if I was him, again, he might be having some, got some things in the iron. We never know. But
we don't know what he's got planned.
But I would definitely parlay this into, because it shows that you have storytelling chops. So this is one of those things where like, all right, well, you worked in one of the biggest places, you got a successful show. Now what are you going to do? Because, we know Hollywood. Hollywood is what you do. What have you done for me lately? And unfortunately, he's not white. So it's not like he's going to fall into something crazy. So it's going to work a little bit harder to get that kind of thing or get that kind of backing again. Because if I'm DC and I'm petty, I would have already scooped him up.
Now DC is looking at what he's doing and they're like, do we really want any parts of that? Like after all the shit we've been through, and now we're starting to bounce back, and they just had Penguin and Batman was a success, and people are legitimately looking forward to James Gunn's Superman next year. Like they got the momentum on their side and the better stories on their side. I'm not better stories in terms of the IP, but the public perception is turning back toward favorable for them. So I don't know if they would want to, but again, and that's something you can't never know. And like you said, we don't know what kind of irons he has in coal. The coal he has in iron, maybe he is planning something. But going back to what you mentioned about Garth Ennis, like the whole point of that is Garth Ennis, much like Alan Moore, like a lot of names that we know had to deal with Marvel or DC bullshit themselves. And what they ended up doing was saying, you know what? I know I'm a dope writer. I made all these contacts and connections in the publishing world. I'm going to create my own thing. And they do it. And now, again, look, Kirkman can now go back and be like, I'll do what I want to do if I choose to write for Marvel. Marvel just having Kirkman on one of their, on anything that they own bumps up their business now. And they had to understand, and they realized that, again, there's your art and what you can own as your IP, and it remains still your art. And then there's the stuff that you're hired to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing
And you
that
don't own that.
the Marvel, so Marvel's wave now of writers, essentially that it's a bunch of indie writers that they've struck deals with, saying, all right, cool, you have your indie thing, do what you want to do, but now do that thing, but do it in our sandbox. And it's pretty interesting because most of them have kept their intellectual property, and they some of them still write that book, maybe once a year or whatever, but they all do, they all write, they write for the big two, they take a fat check and they're exclusive and that whole nine, but they have the flexibility to still do their independent stories as well as playing the Marvel sandbox. With back in the day, a lot of those writers did it. So it's interesting to see that. So if I'm Beau Demayo, I'm at a point where okay, cool, I have a good name now because of the X-Men stuff, and I got a little bit of street cred. So that either, and a following. So it's either roll that into doing a comic book for 12 issues. That's your own idea. Shoot, make it, do it. And I laugh because that's the thing I loved about the Boys and Wanted as well, was just, like Millar and Ennis, they took the tropes, right? They had the Superman trope, they had the Batman trope, they had all of it. And again, they didn't call him that. They changed the name to whatever and all that kind of stuff because they know the rules. But if you really feel that strongly that you could do a better X-Men, then do a better X-Men.
Yeah, like Kirkman did with Invincible.
Yep.
Invincible is basically Superman and Jonathan and his son. That's all it is. And what if the Kryptonians had not died and they had created a vast empire and they conquered the galaxy? That's it. And he uses that as the base, and then he uses the tropes to unpack that. So you don't know that Omni-Man is the main antagonist until they hit you in that first one. You're like, oh shit, he's the one. Superman is bad. Run, everybody run.
Yeah,
But I think not gonna survive this.
And I think that's the thing where you're just that makes most sense because, dude, that's how. And again, and both of those people in both instances came out on top. Now, again, both guys are white. They have different resources. But those
Absolutely.
are good. Those are good models to kind of channel that annoyance and frustration and that energy into something that's your own. Because bet money, if he was like, "Oh, yo, I'm doing this thing. It's an all black thing, the all black story. They all got powers through something. Whatever the hell you want to do with it, but have fun." And I think you're right. You could parlay that into something that could actually be a little bit more memorable than just just yelling at the wind every time. Because I can tell you that Marvel social team and all that shit, they give zero fucks about everything they said. They're like,
they only care by as much as they're logging it. And if it ever comes to a point where they have to take legal action, they have all the evidence right there of all the things and the statements that he's saying. That recent thing is him literally saying they like to shoot themselves in the foot Like that could be considered defaming if somebody really wanted to dig into it, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that he should be careful
Yeah,
about
exactly. Because
how about,
well, and also too, as we said again, like you're still a black man in this industry, dude. You know what it is. Like it's it's like
yeah,
you probably know even more. And so I think that's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, it's like I see what you're doing to a point, but then there's a part where you're like, well, I've done enough. Let me go get them back on the back end, and then and still come out on top. So I'm. It's more like, man, you're veering into the pettiness part, but you're not taking that petty into doing it in something.
yeah, you're not charging it to, if it was a racial issue, then you should charge it to the race card. Like I think the whole time he's had people's attention especially since the end when X-Men 97 came out and it was hot and everybody loved it, and leading up to the Emmys and the Emmys winning. That whole time was time where he was cultivating an audience and he could have been teasing something. Like just like working it in there. And imagine if he had stuff ready, that would have been the perfect opportunity to be like, look, I'm going to push this. I'm going to try. I might have to do Kickstarter or GoFundMe, but this is my idea for a story. It's totally mine. And I just want you guys support. Forget about Marvel and Disney, because they largely forgotten about you, man. Like they're moving on. You're not going to be rehired. You don't own the X-Men. You wrote a good story, a great story. It's being heralded as the only adaptation that's worth watching of X-Men, which is an exaggeration, but
Yeah.
largely true. It's
Yeah.
largely true.
And I think that's the part where I was like, oh man, I just hope, like, again, it's veering into the pettiness that doesn't do anything. I think that's the part where I'm kind of like, oh man, I see you squandering it. Hopefully you can come back on the end or the other side, but
Don't be fooled by corporate art.
Yeah, man,
you do not own it.
Exactly.
They pay you for a reason.
Yep,
And that reason is
you're a
they
straight up
own what you do.
You're a straight up mercenary. Come in, do what you need to do, and get out. 'Cause at the end of the day, you're replaceable like everybody else. And I think that's the overall, lesson for this story. Because again, like they said, man, you can make one of the dopest things that's been of this for that specific IP. But at the end of the day, they're gonna keep on moving, bro. Like,
now, I wouldn't recommend to him trying to go for X-Men equivalent just because he's pissed off.
Yeah,
because I don't think no story that's not X-Men will work, because heroes learn that lesson hard years ago.
And honestly, I think it sucks because Heroes had probably the easiest, funnest like log line and pitch line. They had a great trailer lead up, had an interesting first pilot episode.
And the first season was really good. It's just after that, and they blame the writer's strike, but I think it was just they didn't have any more ideas for that.
Hey, I totally agree. I think that was a thing where it's like, it showed when they kept their most popular character in a different time period for too long, essentially. And so it's one of those things where, like, are you actually thinking this out, or are you just like, well, and also we talked about this before with a lot of American shows where they honestly don't think past the first one or two seasons.
Oh, and especially during that time, pre-writer strike 08.
Oh yeah,
like that was a lot of, especially NBC, and except for the comedies, but the comedies didn't have to think shit through like that. Dramas do.
Yeah, dramas definitely do, and I think, and then it's funny because if nothing else, the writer strike and the subsequent strikes after force TV to actually think a little bit more like that. So now you have like 8 to 12 episodes now, right? So the arcs are a little bit shorter. Yeah, Fringe. There are a lot.
Fringe was the first out of that strike to kind of take that model, because I think the last season of Fringe was like that.
Mm-hmm.
Early seasons were before the strike, and then the strike happened during maybe their third season. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm getting this all wrong. But to the point is that there was a shift.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the part that we have to figure that and it's funny talking to people that are, part of crews that make the shows. It sucks for them because now their working periods are shorter now, right? Back in the day, 24 episodes, you're gonna be on the show for 6 months to 8 months, almost, sometimes a year, depending on how things go. Nowadays,
also back then seasons were not rolled out the way they are now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
I'm forgetting how exactly it was, but it wasn't like, so to those 22 episodes were not considered a season. They were just, sort of pods of episodes that were later clumped together as seasons. Now, with the exception of certain shows like Babylon 5, where clearly JMS knew exactly where he was going and what he wanted to do and how he was going to make that story work with 22 episodes each cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing where it's like he had a plan and he had a plot in the plan where a lot of the people are just like, I had this idea for the show, and then they're like, oh shit, now we got another season. What are we gonna do? Oh, we have more budget.
Yep.
Let's figure it out.
And that's essentially Heroes. And the irony is that Whedon's shows, and maybe there was something deeper going on with him that we just didn't know at the time, but his shows often do have a plan. And you could tell when you watch the first season. I recently rewatched, Firefly? And I was like, oh man, if this had just a slightly better budget, wasn't on Fox, and came just a few years after it debuted, this would have been like a 5-season midway to probably somewhat close to Buffy status success.
Yeah, definitely. And then
as
also,
a sci-fi.
Yeah, and also it got dicked over because they got they were shown out of order. That was one. So a lot of when they aired, all the episodes were all over the place. So it was hard to get a track for regular audiences. What was what, And then also too, because of that and the scheduling stuff, that's what made it that's what basically essentially screwed it. It was one of those things where we used to say, if it's on Fox, you got about 2 seasons.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of show examples like that where they came on, and what was that one with Kevin Bacon where he was like a serial killer or something like that?
Yeah. And then Jack Bauer had his own show that was like with some kid, and that was out for about 2 seasons.
They even revived. Remember they did the
24 again.
24 revival with the guy that was in Dr. Dre. Yeah. And he also played the guy with the dreads in Walking Dead. With the glasses.
Horrible wig.
Yeah. Oh man.
He got done dirty too. All black people get done dirty in Walking Dead. You hear me, Walking Dead?
Oh yeah, they didn't. Oh, you go back and watch those first all of the seasons. Especially if you was a black man, you didn't have no chance on that show until they found a safe one in Gabriel. And then he was just like there forever. And all manner of things happened to this man on that show.
Forever. Going back, I think again, it goes back to, what have you done for me lately? And we know how these how Hollywood does it. And, usually white creators have the luxury of saying dumb shit or whatever, and then being quiet for a year and coming back after whatever. But we also know that we don't get, a lot of the black creators don't get that same luxury. And so I think I'm really hoping he's got something up the sleeve or something, because it's slowly getting to the point where you're like, all right, man, like that's cool and cute to make fun of XYZ, but now what are you doing,
And here's another Here's another side of that. How long does it take to tweet a thought? Less than a few seconds, right? So maybe he's tweeting in between working on his own shit. And that's the only thing we could hope for him, is that he is not just sitting there thinking of a new clever way or stewing on whatever what was and what will never ever be, and he has moved on, and he's just responding accordingly. Because I'll say this, we would be remiss if we don't mention this. A lot of times when he makes these comments, he is responding to something that a fan has said or sent to him and one of his thoughts or whatever. So in that regard, I don't blame him for engaging. Like I said, we just hope that he's working on his own stuff, because that's where the real money and the real IP and the real connection of when you really explode and you make it, you step out amongst the crowd, right? You no longer just a writer who someone hires and is writing for their stuff. You now own this thing. And you made the biggest point about The Boys and Garth Ennis. It's like, just look at what The Boys is. I didn't know about that until Amazon started running those promos. That is when I learned about The Boys, and that I knew who Garth Ennis was,
Yep.
but I didn't know that he had wrote this whole saga.
Yep. And then what's cool about it is it's a complete story from start to finish. So you can go get it. It starts here, it goes in the middle, and it has an ending, and it's definitive. It's not, it has a little side things here and there and all that kind of stuff, but his story is told, and he got to tell exactly how he wanted to tell it. And it's also interesting how, it hopped a couple companies, I think 2 companies or 3 companies for it to finally finish, but still, he still got it done. And so, but yeah, that's my only thing. I hope, I truly, truly, truly hope he got something cooking and he's going to surprise us all. And I think that would be awesome, because then that just kind of, the best success is always the best revenge, as opposed to just, throwing the rocks at the house.
Dude, clapping. I got to clap to that one, because I was literally just thinking that it was like the best way that he can rub it in their face is to go out there and do his own thing. And then one day, I guarantee you, they'll be knocking at his door and being like, "Beau, we just want you to come back to create this awesome stuff and make us a lot of money again."
Yep, exactly.
Or we'll pay you. No, not even that. We'll pay for your stuff to come and make money for us and more money for you.
Yep, exactly.
The George R. Martin, the Stephen King, the Garth Ennis, the J.K. Rowling.
I'll even say the Rob Liefelds. He created Cable and Deadpool, and he has a horrible drawing style, but that horrible drawing style is his signature now. And it don't matter what he does going forward, he always created those characters. So he's used that as a badge of honor since then. And so, which is parlayed that into doing stuff for Marvel itself, like writing city stories and doing his shitty drawings for them as well. But he has a name and he has the cachet, and he rode that for literally 30 years, which is
the only thing I will say to that is that you still, even though he created the character, he still has to fight to own it.
Yep, completely. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because it's in someone else's sandbox, and that's
honestly, I think Liefeld probably earlier on, because that was the big break between Marvel and Image, or the guys that left to go do Image. McFarlane, Liefeld, Silvestri, and I think Valentino. I think those 4 were the main antagonizers, because they're the ones that made all these books to what they were, with their creations, with their ideas. And Marvel was like, and this is the house of ideas, yo, we own all that shit. So they're like, fuck it, we're out.
And all those names went, and look at Todd McFarlane, not just Spawn, and some of the amazing proper things that he's created over the years via Spawn alone, and his toy company.
But he also, too, the interesting part was Jim Lee was their golden boy at that time, and he was like, classic, very stereotypical Asian kid, just heads down, get the work done, kill it. And then they were surprised that they lost him to Image, but it was because he got to trade his own ideas and do whatever he want, which was actually pretty cool.
And now McFarlane releases statues and it has his signature. It is designed from his stuff, and it's a special edition.
And Jim Lee runs creative over at DC at the very, very top now for all of it. So I think it's one of those things where, like, I hope that he's actually putting that time in and creating his own shit, making his own deals while he's throwing these rocks just to balance it out, because it would be a shame for him to be a flash in the pan and we never hear from him ever again or anything.
He showed that he's very talented and that he deserves an opportunity. But what we want to see is, and I really do want to see him do his own thing, because I respect writers more when they create their own stuff, because that's the hardest part of being a writer, is creating your own stories and getting them out there and having them make money as intellectual properties for you. And that's where I hope his mind is, as you said, as he keeps throwing these rocks, because he's free to do it. Now, like you said, it only takes a few seconds a day to do a tweet or thread or whatever, and then he's just responding to fans. But we hope that in the midst of all that, he's scribing. He's too talented not to be. And that he's scribing his own stuff. He's not thinking about what would have been or could have been with the X-Men stories. I mean, there's going to be plenty of that over the next few years, and some of them will be good and some of them will be bad. But at the end of the day, that's a machine that can't no longer be a cog in, and you shouldn't want to.
Yep. And on that, we will end it. Thanks everybody for listening. We're out here. We'll see you guys with full strength soon. But this is Blerdlines News, and we are out.
Goodbye.